I'm going to go over the reading from Job from Friday, since I didn't make a video on Friday, at least a portion of it, because this is among the more famous quotations from the entire book of Job, and it really has a kind of prophetic and stunning beauty to it. From Friday, Job is complaining, have pity upon me, O ye my friends, for the hand of God hath touched me. See, there's something about his suffering that is bringing him closer to an encounter with God. It's not just random suffering, although it appears to be, and he's crying out to know why it's happening. And yet he already knows that his suffering is the hand of God which has touched him. He continues, why do ye persecute me as God, and are not satisfied with my flesh? Which is both a way of saying, you, my miserable comforters, are thinking of yourselves as being holier than thou. You're persecuting me as if you were God, and you're not even satisfied with my flesh. But that's also a way of saying, this is what God is doing to me. And yet, verse 23, oh, that my words were now written, oh, that they were printed in a book, which they are, ironically, that they were graven with an iron pen and lead in the rock forever, that my suffering could stand as a permanent memorial. Eventually, well, I mean, not only in Job's case, but in the case of Jesus Christ, that is certainly true. And the suffering of Christ, which is graven with an iron pen and lead in the rock forever, becomes a stumbling block and a stone of scandal for those who do not understand it. He continues, this is also quoted in Handel's Messiah, verse 25, for I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. Where does this come from? Job somehow is prophetically seeing through his suffering a great and deep truth, and his trust that he will be vindicated. Sometimes that word can be translated not redeemer, but my vindicator. Either way, he knows that he will be made right and bought out of suffering, redeemed. I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God. Even after death, I will see God, whom I shall see for myself. And mine eyes shall behold, and not another. I shall see him with my eyes, though my reins be consumed within me. In the midst of this, Job has an incredible sense of loyalty. It's more than a sense. It's this prophetic insight of how somehow this suffering itself from the hand of God will pull him to a place where he will behold his Redeemer and Vindicator, and he will see God face to face in spite of this or because of this. Now that's amazing. As for today's readings, why is Abraham so insistent that he find a wife for Isaac, not among the Canaanites? Remember, Abraham is living in the land that God has told him to go to. It's not among his people and his family. He's a stranger and a sojourner. He's a stranger in a strange land. The answer is, and this becomes more important later on in the history of the Jews, there would be a diminution or a diluting of the faith of Abraham. You know, we know that there are people around us who don't quite understand what we're being taught about the faith, and we are not to judge them, as Christ told us on Friday in the reading from Matthew. But by the same token, we also know that we are easily led astray, or that our children would be. If Isaac marries a Canaanite, within a generation or two or three, they're not going to know the true God, Abraham's Redeemer, who fulfilled his promise through Abraham with the birth of Isaac and by rescuing Isaac from the sacrifice that was demanded of him. Abraham knows it's important that he maintain, through cultivation and education, this connection of him and his people to the one true God. It's the same way that we Catholics in America are just being Americanized, which is not all bad, because America is not a bad place. Not all bad, at least. But we are forgetting who we are as a people, and we are not being holy, which that word means set aside. We are forgetting the one true God. With that in mind, let's take a look at the final thing I want to look at today, which is that one verse that I had you read from Matthew. I love this verse because, listen, I've learned how true this is in my own life. I like it in the King James. Well, the actual King James, not the New King James. Give not that which is holy to the dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend you. Or in a more modern version, do not give dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you. We forget that although tolerance is important, and although we cannot judge others because we never know what is in their hearts, we nevertheless have to be prudent. That's what Abraham is doing by making sure that Isaac has a wife not from among the Canaanites. And that's what you will learn. If you have pearls of wisdom and you try to give them to people, people not only will not appreciate them if they're not ready for them and not seeking them, if they're not hungry for them, they will turn and tear you to pieces. There are some things that Jesus says that are proverbial, sound like proverbs like that, but that are incredibly and deeply true that you keep running into throughout your life. It's one of the things that I've learned over and over again. And I hope, dear students, that you are prepared to receive these pearls of wisdom that come from Scripture. You have to prepare yourself to receive it, and you have to hunger and thirst for righteousness, because then you will be filled. But if you're not, then I will not cast my pearls before you, or at least I will do so only by video, so that you cannot literally turn and tear me to pieces, because it is what happens. We cannot judge, but we have to be aware of the differences between people and act accordingly. Still, though, that passage from Job, imagine that. The vision of God that comes from a man who is suffering that deeply.